the meeting. Right on cue. Thank you. As you can see, we are still waiting for steering committee members to arrive to reach quorum. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with the meeting logistics while they arrive. Please do next slide. All right, so once again, we are at the South Sacramento Florence Community Air Protection Steering Committee meeting. Today is Monday, July 22nd. Thank you all for being here tonight. Next slide. Tonight's agenda doesn't have too many items because we want to allow each of the items that we do have to have ample time. So we are starting with welcome. So once again, welcome. I'll go over the meeting logistics for both the in-person participants as well as our participants who are joining remotely. Then we will, for the rest of the welcome and introduction, I will go over meeting commitments, and then we will also do roll call. Next slide. All right, so just a few logistics. For in-person and virtual reminders, we may pause at some points during tonight's meeting to make adjustments to ensure that we are making space for equitable engagement for both the in-person attendees as well as the virtual attendees. For in-person attendees, steering committee members, if you have a question or comment, please raise your hand or your name placard, and that's for the in-person steering committee members. For virtual attendees, if you have a question or comment, please raise your virtual hand, or you can type your question or comment in the chat box. And the way that we'll be taking the questions or comments, the order is we'll start with steering committee members who are in person. Then we'll turn it over to steering committee members who are participating online. Then we'll turn it over to public in person and end with public participants who are virtual. Next slide. And just a few more virtual logistics. You can message the host or the cohort. Again, this is specifically for virtual participants. If you're having technical difficulties, just message the host or co-host, or you can send an email to ab617clerk@airquality.org for assistance. And during the steering committee discussion period, or during the public comment period, each person who wants to speak will need to raise your virtual hand. And so for on the Zoom web application, you either click participants or reactions, and then as you can see, there's a raise hand feature. If you're participating by the phone, then you would just press *9 to raise your hand. And when you do, for telephone participants, please state your name and your affiliation. And lastly, when you're called, just make sure to unmute yourself on an app by pressing *6. Next slide. Now I'll turn it over to our interpreter, Estefania, to go over this information in Spanish.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Estefania. We have Claudia in the back who will be offering interpretation services throughout the day for in-person. At the moment, we don't have any interpretation requests, but if somebody does arrive, we will be offering that simultaneous interpretation. So just a couple of reminders. If you see us signaling this, just means slow down. That just means, hey, we need to keep up with your speed. And of course, make sure you use the mic as well. I'll make the message in Spanish just in case somebody does request it. Hola, buenas tardes, mi nombre es Estefania y tenemos a Claudia, Claudia al borde del salón ofreciendo interpretación simultánea. Si alguien ocupa la interpretación, por favor de levantar la mano o pedirnos un dispositivo. Vamos a estar apoyándoles a través del día. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Estefania. All right, next slide, please. Now, I'm going to take a couple of seconds to review the Charter Code of Conduct. This is for both the steering committee members, as well as the members of the public who are in the room. Just remember that we are treating everybody with courtesy and respect. We will avoid attacking, people personally or demeaning anyone. We will not interrupt others who have the floor. And we will avoid disrupting or delaying the meeting. We want to make sure that we respect everybody's time. We also want to strive to be fair and unbiased towards one another. That includes the public as well as our district staff and the facilitator. We value each other's time and we respect everybody's opportunity to speak. We will strive to reach consensus, but we will agree to disagree if necessary. We will listen courteously and attentively to the public. And lastly, we'll strive to hold each other accountable to this code of conduct. So during the meeting tonight, if there are moments, I may pause to refresh the code of conduct. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. All right, so tonight's agenda, we've gone through the welcome and introduction, then we'll have roll call. We will also, let's see, we will, go over any administrative items. We will also then move on to action items. There are 3 action items on tonight's agenda. The first one is the camp surf boundary. Second one is the final boundary vote, which will, we will have further explanation when we get to that point. And then the third action item is United Latinos request to borrow AB 617 air quality monitors. After our action items, there will be updates. We will then move to new business and upcoming meeting topics. And then we will close it out with public comments at the very end, and then we'll adjourn. And we'll do that by 8 o'clock on the dot, okay? Yes, all right. Before we go any further, just want to clarify, I don't know if everybody was here at the last meeting. My colleague, I'm with Kearns and West, and my colleague Britta Romans is normally the one to facilitate these meetings. You all know Britta very well. Britta is actually on a well-deserved vacation, so they are not here with us tonight, but we'll be back for the next meeting and subsequent meetings. So everything else remains the same, but just wanted to let you know that Britta probably is not thinking about work right now as they're on vacation. So just want to let you know where they're at.
So, I think we. Sorry, we got a couple additional mics for efficiency sake. I thought I just saw a message come through online. I think it was from Armand. Can somebody pull that up?
I was just saying that Jesus Cacho is online and she's Spanish speaking.
We currently don't have the interpretation for the Zoom. We do have the interpretation in person. We didn't receive a request to have interpretation via remotely. So we don't have that service available today. Maybe she can say that.
Yes, Stefania.
Hola, buenas tardes. Tenemos interpretación disponible en persona, pero actualmente no tiene la función de interpretación activada por Zoom, así que si ocupa los servicios tendrá que estar en persona para el futuro. Si es que prefiere participar virtualmente, tendrá que solicitar interpretación antemano. Ahorita hablo con los hosts para ver si es que pueden activar la interpretación, pero en este caso no estamos seguros si lo van a poder hacer en este momento. Gracias.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Vincent to conduct roll call.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay. Thanks for showing up, everybody. First, we have a couple of housekeeping things we need to do. First, if you guys don't know, Bill Nolan, resigned or stepped down from the steering committee. And so we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge all his service to our committee. And, he was a co-lead for 3 years and on the committee for 5 years. So thank you, Bill. Also, we have our new, committee member here, Lori Walker, and, Roberto Rizzo, sorry. And so we have 2 new, committee members here today in attendance, so thank you guys for stepping up and joining our committee. We really need the help. There was another thing that we were going to do during introductions, and we thought instead of waiting for anybody who has an announcement, this will be new this meeting, but in the upcoming meetings, during the introductions, if you have something to announce, you can announce it during the introductions. So I'll start with who's here. Roberto Rizzo. Here.
Right. Well, how do you respond?
Yeah, here, yeah.
Here,
Mhm. And we're just doing the official roll call for the meeting. Lori Walker,
Here.
Reina Moreno,
Here.
Barry Boyd. Here. Rhonda Henderson.
Here, and on the
Oh, and Rhonda has an announcement. Yay!
after 25, this is it.
Oh, just a minute, sorry. Stand up.
And we have the wired one today.
All right, I'm Ronnie Henderson, and on August 6th, my neighborhood association, on the Creek Valley High Community Association, will be having its National Night Out event at Shasta Community Park from 6 to 8. We're still looking for vendors. There'll be food, everything will be free, it's family friendly. And we'll have things for the children who will bounce out and back and shows, face paint, and so forth. So, help me spread the word.
Great. And will the Air District be there this year?
Yes, they will.
Okay, great. We're gonna be sharing the 8617 news. Richard Deacon, here. Morgan Brown.
Here.
Okay, Vince Valdez, here. Yeah, do I go through everybody else's name? Okay, all right. Bishop Chris Baker. Michael Lampkin.
Here,
Oh, Bishop's online too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the, third one right there.
Great. Okay, and Pat Shelby. Rachel Brown. Ward Winchell, where's this one for everybody who's not here? Ward's not here. Okay. Stephanie Williams. Stephen Street. Tito Hong. And Richard Falcone. You like me to do the secretary too?
I could do it.
Okay.
Well, actually, before you go on, those online have to verbally acknowledge that they're here or show by raised hand that they are here when they're called.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead, for steering committee members who are participating online, we're gonna go ahead and go through roll call again so that you can verbally acknowledge your attendance tonight. Please unmute yourself when your name is called, and let us know that you can say you're present or here.
Bishop Baker. Okay, Michael Lampkin.
here,
Okay, we'll have to wait for Bishop to reappear again. Okay, moving forward with the Air District.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Janice Lane Snyder. David Yang.
Sarah.
Sarah Paula Parsons. Here. Leah Collins. Here. Amy Roberts. Here. Mark Weisenhuser.
Here.
And online, we have Ray Porter.
Here.
We also have Angela Thompson online.
here,
And then for CARB staff, we have Kevin Holtz here.
Here.
Adriana Smith. Facilitator Veronica.
Here.
That's a total.
All right, and now, we'd like to offer members of the public the opportunity to also introduce yourselves. So I'm gonna go ahead and run the mic over. You just go ahead and say your name, neighborhood, or affiliation.
Roman, I'm with United Latinos.
Welcome.
Jose Saldana, South Sacramento resident.
Great.
Adrian Rand, Valley Vision.
Wonderful.
Does any member of the public have any, events that they would like to announce? Typically, we have, saved this for the end of the meeting, but sometimes we recognize we run out of time and we wanted to make sure that, those announcements were made up front.
Any events? Okay, great. Okay, so now we're gonna turn it over to the online public participants. So, if you're a member of the public and, would like to introduce yourself, go ahead and say your name, your neighborhood, and or affiliation. And please go ahead and use the, raise hand function. All right, I see, Jeff Solomon, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jeff Solomon. I'm a resident of District 8. I'm a member and the officer of the Meadowview Neighborhood Association, and also a member and officer of the Meadowview Urban Tree Project. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And it looks like, Carrie.
Hi, this is Carrie Whitlock. I work for the City of Elk Grove as the Strategic Planning and Innovation Program Manager. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see, looks like Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Hadamio, and I'm a resident of South Sacramento with the Sacramento Environmental Justice Coalition.
Great, thank you. And then we have Herman.
This is Herman Barahona, community organizer with the Sacramento Environmental Justice Coalition.
Okay, looks like we have introduced all members of the public who are participating. Oh, I stand corrected. Looks like Eric. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm Eric Bissinger with the Enforcement Division at CAR.
Great, thank you for being here. Okay, and so we actually would like to also, if any of the virtual participants have any events to share, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and you have up to 30 seconds to share your event information. Erica, is that an old hand, or do you have an event to share?
Yeah, no, well, it is an old hand, but I did want to raise it again just to share. So I'm also on the Community Planning Advisory Council, and I wanted to share that there are 2 projects that came before the CPAC, 2 more additional trucking projects. One's on McNee Avenue in Franzanetti, and the other is wanting to add additional truck spots. So I was going to email the information out to all the steering committee members as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information, Erica.
I just want to acknowledge that Bishop Chris Baker says that he is here in the chat.
Okay, great. We're acknowledging that Bishop Chris Baker is acknowledging his participation or presence tonight in the chat. Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on ahead with the next item. Vincent, going ahead and cover the approval of the last meeting summary.
Has everybody had a chance to read the summary of the last meeting? Okay, good. Were there any additions to it or any changes? Anybody see anything? Entertain a motion to accept the minutes from last month. So moved. Okay. Okay. All right, so then we'll start with everybody that's in the room, starting with Morgan. Richard? Thank you. Rhonda? Yeah. Vince, yes. Barry? Aye. Raina? Lori?
Yes.
Roberto? Okay, and
Before we move on, I'd like to remind us for, equitable purposes, let's use the mic, for every time somebody speaks, please, and I'm happy to run it.
Well, just for procedural purposes, for Lori and Roberto, since you are new to the steering committee, and this would be your first meeting, we will hold your votes as abstain.
thank you. And then online. I can't see who we have online. Michael Lincoln?
Yes.
Thank you. Bishop Baker?
Yes.
Thank you. And those are the two we have online?
Are there any other steering committee members online?
Okay. All right, motion passes.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one is you're going to move into the presentation. Okay. All right. So we're going to be voting on action item number one. We're going to be discussing action item number one to set up for the action item number two, actually, I believe, correct? So the presentation is going to be on the steering committee. We met on the first Tuesday of the month, and we worked and we voted to ratify the boundaries that we decided here at the June 4th meeting, which are over there on the wall. And we also decided to propose that the camp boundaries be the same boundaries as the CERT boundaries. And so we have a little slide presentation of how we came to that decision, some information for everybody on the committee and the community, so we can come to a consensus. Was your part?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so let's go back to the previous slide. So we received two questions that were relevant to the discussion tonight. One of the questions was, will we be moving the camp boundaries, the monitoring boundaries, along with the CERT boundaries? And that decision is at the discretion of the steering committee. And so this is what we will be discussing in action item number one. And the second question that we received was to clarify how that would affect funding. Because funding comes from two different pots. So the next slide we're going to share is about the two different pots of funding. Next slide, please. All right. So for expanded boundaries, cap funding impacts, first, as a blanket statement, AB 617 is a state requirement, and the state legislature has only provided partial funding for this program and implementation of 617. How we typically see AB 617 cap funding is split into two pots. One in which we refer to as implementation funding. And the second part, the second bucket is referred to as incentive funding. And so for implementation funding, so I'm going to go through each of the different pots first. So for implementation funding, the funding is received by district. is allocated by the state, by district, and not individual AB 617 communities. Monitoring, the impacts to monitoring, areas can be prioritized. The steering committee can directly focus on specific areas, and expanding the boundaries can potentially provide more areas for you guys to choose from and to track as we move forward into the process. For strategies, in the SERP strategies, strategies can also be prioritized, but in general, resources might need to be spread out in a larger area. So, you know, you have a smaller area, now you're moving to a bigger area. Essentially, that resource would need to be spread out more. And then for, but what I'll also say is that strategies can also be prioritized to focus on key areas that the steering committee believes should be focused on. And so, you know, if the steering committee says, hey, you know, I want to have more trees in the community. But you can also say, hey, I want it this where, you know, this place and this place, can we focus to work to get trees in these areas? So the second pot of funding is incentive funding, incentive funding, and the same thing applies here. Funding is received by district, not individual steering 617 communities. The incentive fundings can be used outside of 8617 boundaries. And the SERP strategies, as we're moving forward, can be funded by capped incentives pending CARB approval. So these are project funding, if you can think about that. And the projects, though, still needs to be prioritized within the disadvantaged communities areas in Sacramento. Rafe, is there anything that you would like to add to the incentive funding?
Just a slight clarification on the DACs. Those are the state designated disadvantaged communities in CAL virus screen. So we're using that as kind of our guide for that. But everything else, yeah, spot on. Thanks, Janice. Nothing else to add. Happy to answer questions though, if there's any.
Thank you, Rafe.
Okay, so now Vincent, you're up.
Sorry, the next slide. Okay, so that was in general the response to those two questions. But before we go into the action items, we would like to share a little bit of recap for all of you. How did we get to this place? Tonight, we're going to be talking about boundaries and finalizing the boundaries. We started in January, actually, with the neighborhood association engagement. This outreach committee identified several neighborhood associations where we gave presentations, wanted to find out what the concerns were of the community, and the steering committee had has a survey that they released out and for these community members to take so that we can get some more information. In between, there was a couple of events that we also attended, the Lunar New Year Festival, the Dia de la Tierra event, to get information from the community about what areas were they concerned about. And all that information was provided to the steering committee on the June 4th meeting to come up with the draft boundaries as you guys are, that you guys could use as part of your consideration. Next slide. So at the June 4th meeting, as you guys all know, we came up with the draft boundaries. The SIG steering committee took public written comments on the draft boundaries, and that was released through public notice. We've sent those out to various public community members. We did receive comments that is in your packet, that was included in your packet. So you want to take a look at that. That was sent out last week for you guys to review. And after we went out to public comment on the draft boundaries, we also took a couple of We also went out to a couple of events on June 22nd and July 2nd to get additional feedback from community members on where they would like to see this work continue. In between June 24th, many of you guys were all there. You also took a community bus tour to look at some, some of the areas that were expanded, some of the areas that were included in the expanded areas. And here we are today at the July 22nd meeting, where the vote will be discussed for the final boundaries and whether or not this camp boundaries and the SERP boundaries will be the same. This is a slide of the community bus tour for those who or are not on the steering committee and members of the public. This was the boundaries, or this was the bus tour that we worked with the co-leads on, as well as sharing it out with the steering committee members. And we had a whole host of steering committee members that attended, along with elected officials. Our Vice Chair Tino, Vice Mayor, City of Sacramento, Maple, Councilmember Guerra from the City of Sacramento. And then we also had the Air District as well as CAR in attendance. Next slide, please. This is community feedback on the 2 meetings that we had, or the 2 events that we attended, where we asked committee members to put stars on areas that they thought this work is important. And so you guys have that in your packet. I know it's a little bit difficult to see on the projector, but for those who are online, I believe there's a link to the feedback that we received from the community as well. So we have 2 slides on that, but it's hard to see on the projector, so I'll direct you to your paper copies and or the online. Next slide. Next one. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Vincent, because the SERP subcommittee had all this information and came up with a recommendation for the steering.
Okay, everybody, so we're back to me, and we're doing the SERP, so it's on page 10 of your agenda, or meeting agenda here. It's the same map that's up there, and so, the SERP committee met, we talked at length about different areas, we looked at different maps that we had came up in the past, and we decided to adopt the boundaries that were formulated from the June 4th meeting, right here. And so we also, so right now, we're just gonna talk about the SERP boundaries, and those are the boundaries right there. And at our meeting, we also proposed to include the camp boundaries to be the same boundaries as the SERP boundaries. So the red line around there will be our new camp and SERP boundaries. And so that's what we're discussing right now. Let me see. Item presentation, steering committee discussion. So does anybody from the steering committee have any discussion on this item? You go to the next slide.
Hold on.
Yeah. That shows the way we go through it, right?
Yeah. Okay. So we also would like to invite steering committee members, if you have any, if you want to discuss the bus tour, which might also aid this discussion. So steering committee members who participated, do you have anything to offer about the bus tour that Jen's referenced? Are you all thinking, trying to recall the bus tour, or? Any of our steering committee members online, do you have anything you'd like to contribute to this discussion?
Get a better bus with leg room.
Get a better bus with leg room. It was, the church seats were a little cramped.
I will step in regards to the bus tour. There were a couple of places that were pointed out as being permitted, which were no longer in existence. That was on the district's end. I asked that, there's the name at the moment, catch up on what is actually still active, an active permit. You just pointing out the Toyota, repair shop, which Toyota has been closed for a number of years, and is now the Sacramento Native American Council
Health Center.
of, Medical Center, something of that nature, start screwing up the acronym. And there has been, pointed out the largest school bus repair shop in Sacramento was going up over on Luther. Yes, on Luther, it was just on the inside of Luther, which was kind of just rushed past, but pointing out the fact of the amount of buses there every day that with engines running, in the repair mode. My thoughts were that should have been highlighted a little bit, a lot more. It's FY9, and I believe lastly, Metaview, which opened its 3 charging stations within the 2 weeks that we were on the bus tour, just before the 2 weeks, within the 2 weeks of the bus tour, was not mentioned either. And the Metaview, right there, the Metaview Community Center, 24th of Metaview. And to that, which is right next door to the new CNG station, relatively new, it's about a year and a half old, or being opened, it was changed over from an LNC, liquid natural gas to compressed natural gas, which is right next to the job corps, which in between them is the road to the 102 acres where they wanted, where the city owns, they want to rebuild. Just an FYI on the additional information. Actually, this is last. The which I forgot at the time, the Metaview Community Center is, or had been monitored for the chemical contamination and the tons of dirt that had been removed from the Metaview Community Center within the last 2 years or less. And funding to monitor it had run out, and that was a question for the council member a year and a half ago, which I never heard back. What happens now? That wasn't mentioned, which is unbelievable, because of the amount of, again, earth that had been dug out of the Metaview Community Center, which where the basketball court is, that was closed for 6 months, had been dug out and brought in dirt. But a couple of notes that were missed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that feedback. Is the Air District staff taking note? We're not taking public comment or questions, but there will be a moment in the meeting where we will be. So for now, we're gonna limit this discussion to steering committee members.
I helped design the tour, and I did inform my other comments, would it be okay, Janice?
Yeah.
Can you go to this slide so we show it to the discussion? Right now, Jose, we're in this part of the discussion.
Jose, would you hold your comment until, the public comment portion? They won't make any decisions prior to your inclusion.
I'll be 15 seconds, please.
We have,
All right, fine.
yeah, but we definitely want to hear from you, so we will. Okay, Vincent.
Okay, so steering committee motion to vote. So the CERT committee motions to propose that we extend our CERT boundaries to the boundaries on the map over there, as well as the camp boundaries to be the same as the CERT boundaries.
I think we're in the discussion section of the steering committee.
Right now, we're on the steering committee motion to vote, which I'm making the motion on behalf of the CERT subcommittee.
But to that, Vince, we jumped back, he introduced us discussing the bus tour, but the discussion over the boundary
Yeah.
hasn't happened.
Correct, yeah. Go back to steering committee, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right, so now we're on the red line is on the steering committee discussion for the camp boundaries and the CERT boundary. Does anybody on the steering committee have discussion on that? Oh, yeah, you can raise your, and so I don't have a mic that goes around and
Here,
around.
I'll go ahead and, I'll wire.
Yeah, you're gonna have to be the runner. Or you just want to trade.
I'll run this side, you run that side. Yep, okay.
Thank you.
This is that adjustment that we were talking about, earlier.
Thank you. So I just wanted to confirm that based on the imagery, because it's a little small here for my eyes, but majority of the recommendations from community feedback are still implemented in majority within this new boundary line?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, the new boundaries are right there on that big, map there. And it encompasses all of the feedback that we got from everybody and as well as what we, provided during our steering committee on June 4th.
Okay, and I guess, so I was reverting back to, so I didn't attend the La Familia event. I did come to the event that took place on the evaluation did with Psychology Health. I'm just making reference to the actual, like, if you look, I can't really see too much on the top one. It didn't look like there was much feedback as far as the stars that were outside of the boundary. Okay, well, thank you. That was just my question, as far as the actual input from the community members that they put on the map.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the steering committee before we go to the vote? And I just want you guys to know, if Stephanie was here, she would run this part of the meeting a lot better than me, so.
You're doing it.
I'm getting warmed up, I'm getting warmed up. So is there any other questions or comments from the steering committee? Thank you. Thank you, yes.
Thank you, Vincent. This is Roberto Ruiz from Zoom. I have a couple of questions specifically on the funding. I know that the answer was, you mentioned something briefly about it, but Lima does look a lot bigger, right? So I'm wondering, how much bigger size is it in? How much bigger is it in population size in comparison to what we have right now? And the biggest concern is, thinking about how successful we feel that we've been as of this moment, and then, adding more into, steering capacity. Just trying to think about, our ability to deliver.
That's a great question. Oh, okay, sorry. Rhonda, for outreach wants to answer that one.
I think the reason why we're expanding is so that we can focus on those areas that we have got first. So it's not like we're gonna, only territory, we have to better focus on, or areas that you see that we're outside the original boundaries.
Understood. Thank you. And then,
In answer to your question about the funding, there is some funding to still do phase 2 monitoring. And phase 3, we only have one phase 3 monitor till the end of 2025, but we are entertaining discussions later, I'm assuming, on other ways to get a better way to monitor in these new areas that you're asking. So, yeah, so there was a lot of discussion, we haven't done a lot of camp monitoring in these new areas, particularly in the marginalized communities that are in the orange and, the dark, I'm color challenged, so they're dark, red-orange areas, which are the, per virus screen, the, most marginalized communities in our new map. So we're looking at that, but there's some funding available for us to still do some monitoring, but we're entertaining ideas for other ways as well.
thank you. Then the second question would be, so we were talking about the CARP boundaries and then the CERC boundaries. So if we were not, obviously it sounds like this has been discussed and it's, pretty ready to go. But if, the boundaries didn't move, would the CERC boundaries be the ones in the red area? Okay. Oh, so those were decided before the community even started pointing dots on this?
That's a good question. There is no plan B. So, so the CERC committee came up with these boundaries here. And so, maybe we should have had a second choice one as well. You're right.
So
Yeah.
let me provide some additional information. So on the June 4th meeting, that I think you attended, the steering committee at the end of that meeting came up with these red draft boundaries. And then what happened was that, we went out for public comment. You saw the events that we went to. The SERP subcommittee, had a further discussion based on the information that they've collected on what their recommendation would be.
Any other questions for the committee? Any questions from the committee members online? Okay, no? All right, so back to so that's our steering committee discussion. Now we make the motion,
Someone can make the motion, yes.
and I will do that on behalf of the CERT subcommittee meeting that we propose to expand to make the CERT boundaries the same as we agreed upon at the steering committee on June 4th, right there on the map, and then also the camp boundaries to be the same as the CERT boundaries.
I'll second.
Okay,
And then goes-
now we don't vote, but we go to public comments. And Jose, Jose, I have a question. Thank you for waiting, Jose.
Thank you. Hello? Okay, it's good. So I helped with the tour. And what I wanted the steering committee to see was not just permitted sources, but the people who live there. These are some of the people who have the least amount of voice in civic affairs. And I believe they were intentionally excluded. You've heard in this meeting that the most marginalized communities were not part of the original monitoring. So to say that the camp expands with the CERT is a little bit disingenuous because we've heard that funding is not there for the camp beyond phase 2 monitors and a phase 3. Furthermore, the phase 3 monitor, as we were shown, is monitoring for PM 2.5. The community across the street from Campbell's Soup has a bunch of dirt piles in preparation for an aerobic digester. People don't know what's in that soil. With all this wind we've been having, it's blowing into the community, that's PM 10. I don't believe the steering committee has been informed enough to make decisions for those excluded communities. And furthermore, I don't believe it's only about monitoring. I believe those folks' voices were stolen, and you guys can help give it back to them by asking for a separate camp steering committee to correct that injustice, and your CERT steering committee. Now, Roberto mentioned resources, and beyond the material and funding resources, there's your guys' time. If you're working on a CERT, do you have the time to go outreach into the community, to educate the community so that they can make informed decisions for themselves about where they'd like to see the monitors? You know, Dr. King said that when people have decisions made about them without them having a voice in those decisions, it's an injustice. And that's kind of what we're doing right now in deciding for those communities. I would ask the steering committee to please consider advocating for a dual camp and CERT with separate steering committees so that those communities that were intentionally neglected get the focus that they deserve, the education that they deserve, and the opportunity to speak up for themselves and let the Air District know, you know, if their kids have bloody noses in the afternoon from the stuff blowing. Separate from that, there's a lot of auto body shops there with folks standing their cars outside. That's standard practice. That's PM 10. Your phase 3 monitor is not monitoring for that. So the community would not even know. And I would say that in other communities, if those places were being monitored, they would be made aware of PM 10 and they would probably ask for some type of tarp around the 47th Street facility so that all those kids walking home from McClatchy and the Lagro station aren't getting the wind blown on them and who knows what's in the dust. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Mic is turning on. Okay, thank you for your public comment. We are going, before we turn it over to,
There's two on the left. Okay.
before we turn it over, to the steering committee to vote, I wanted to not only open it up to the 2 public comments online, but then, we also would like to, turn it over to Janice. So we're gonna go with the public comment first, and then Janice, you'll go after. So first with Herman.
Hi, yes, I'm glad to see this change after so many years. And for the record, the Sacramento Environmental Justice Coalition is very happy to see that the camp and the SERB boundaries will be included together. I think that's a very good idea to include the communities that were left out for the last 5 to 6 years. And I also agree that there needs to be some more discussion about some details about how we're going to include those communities in the areas that were left out before. Having said that, I think this is progress, and we're in full support of moving this motion forward.
Thank you. Jennifer Holden?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Jennifer Holden. I am the Mangan Park Neighborhood Association lead, as well as a member of the SAC EJC. And I support the changes to the boundaries and expanding them. This boundary expansion will include my neighborhood, which has increased levels of lead, both in the air and probably still somewhat in the soil after it was cleaned 8 years ago from having toxic levels of lead. So yes, wholehearted support from someone within the boundaries and from the Sacramento Environmental Justice Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you. Erica?
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to also voice my support for the expansion of the boundaries to include marginalized communities, both for the air monitoring and emission reduction. I also want to mention that we need to increase the awareness and education strategies in both the zones. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, are there any other members of the public who'd like to make comment? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Janice.
Yes, so Jose, I think, just made a comment about PM10 not being monitored in our phase 2 and phase 3. It is being monitored in both of those phases.
Sorry, would you repeat that last song?
PM10 is being monitored. We do have data for that, for phase 2 and for phase 3.
Just to be clear, I asked at the subcommittee meeting last week, and I was told that it wasn't clear if you were aware. I didn't just pull it out of nowhere. I got it from you guys.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, gonna go ahead and turn it back over to Vincent. Who's gonna turn it over to Mary?
Thank you. And to that, as it was asked, any other public comment online or in person, since there are no respondents? Gone. We will now close public comment. And to that, we will bring it back to the steering committee. If there are any other questions, comments, or concerns that the steering committee would like to bring forward at this time. And Raymond has a question, and I will turn the mic over to her.
Okay, so my question is about funding again. Vince, you said that there was still funding left over, but what is like the percentage left, and like, will it be able to cover? Because this is like about maybe like 2/3 larger than it previously was. So like, will it be able to cover?
I can answer, but you know what? We're gonna go straight to the horse's mouth.
You have something to say about this? So the question I heard is about funding. So the Air District gets allocated funding annually. Okay, and so I'll just say that the challenge to this program is that we only know it annually. So we did receive funding up until December that we can allocate to monitoring up until December of 2025. And The area is expanded more, but as you can see in phase 3, there is one portable laboratory that we have, so we can move that portable laboratory to a different place. And we probably we'll have to have a fuller discussion with the steering committee on how to prioritize like a additional monitoring given the funding that we have. So even with the camp that we have now, we have had to prioritize those areas because there's no possible way probably to put it on every house or every corner. But there are areas where the steering committee can provide an addition, potentially even other, community members on where they would like to see this monitor. Does that help or?
My question was more like how much funding do we have left from what's overlay? But something you can answer.
Yeah, so
percentage-wise.
the latest grant that we received, was, 6.5 million. I'm looking at Mark over there, historically, we have received in the past few years, 1.25 million to implement all of 617 mandates. So that includes the monitoring, that includes the best available retrofit control technology implementation, that includes emission inventory, that includes the development of the camp and the circuit. So that's what we've had been operating. Last year, we requested for the Air Resources Board to provide us with a one-time funding of $5 million to move us to develop a community emission reduction program, a CERP. And so that is a 2-year process. So how we're seeing it is, the first year is 2.5 million, the second year would be 2.5 million. So that is the funding for the CERP. But for the monitoring, we are basically operating as we had received before.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, just expanding a tiny bit on what Janice was just sharing. So she explained, we were fortunate to get a 2-year allocation for doing the CERP. We did that because even before we all saw what was going on with the state budget, we didn't know what was going on. So we wanted to try and get ahead of it and get everything we needed up front. The normal allocation has been just over 1 normally on an annual basis. So as Janice already mentioned, really be more a matter of you as a steering committee and future expansions, whatever, the community providing that feedback of where you would like to see the monitoring we've been doing. Maybe you want to see us move that trailer somewhere else. Just in terms of, and Janice already said, it is an annual allocation by the state legislature. I will just share that the funding has been stagnant for the entirety of the program of 617 on Janice mentioned the 2 different buckets, the implementation. They did do one-time increases twice, but the current budget has removed that. So we're basically at the same level as half a dozen years ago, 5-6 years ago, when the program started with 10 communities statewide. There's now upwards of 18, 19. I think there may be some more being added in, but we're still at the same funding level statewide as back then. So that's just the challenge that not just our community and our air district, but throughout the state is, as we've added more areas that are in need and are, very much should be having these services, the state has had the same level regardless of any inflation or anything else going on. So those are just the challenges. As Janice mentioned, the steering committee can certainly, if you're expanding the boundaries and to include the camp, you can say, hey, set a trailer over at point A, and we'd like to move it over here instead. Those are the type of opportunities that definitely do exist.
And just one more thing, there has been some, I wouldn't say like a firm commitment from the state legislature, but there is a it sounded like there was a commitment that for the next 5 years, they were going to continue the 50 million allocation for the statewide 617 program.
just for clarity.
We're on the same subject, please continue.
Thank you. Just for clarity, just walking you through, $5 million has, been accepted, the current grant at 2.5 million each year for 2 years for CERT. Correct? For CERT development, excuse me. The 6.5 million that you first started with, what is that dollar amount again? Or what is that funding? You first started at, your opening was,
So it's total. So it's the total, so the grant that we received was 6.5. But hold me to that number. But we received the 1.25 as we've historically gotten in the past 4 or 5 years. And then we received that one-time funding of 5 million, so that equals to 6.1.
yeah, just, it sounded a little different.
Yeah.
When you were saying it, but I'm with you, and putting a very fine point on it, out of that current 1.25 million, what is the amount of dollars that are left to do monitoring once we do the vote or to expand the boundaries or not, specifically for camp monitoring?
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. We have not started expending that amount yet.
1.25 available.
And, but again, I wanna clarify that that is for the district to implement 617 as a whole.
I'm sorry, 617 as well in camp, correct? Not CERT, but camp for the 1.25.
It includes monitoring. It also includes emission reporting, our rule implementation, best available retrofit control technology implementation, and working with the steering committee members here in developing and implementing the CARE.
Fantastic, and so we're gonna move on. To the other, right, to the other, steering committee members, but just so everybody understands, the increased boundaries, as was pointed out, is to put basically a larger blanket on the area, but the concentration will be those communities that are the highest level reported on environmental screen, and those safe communities that have been left out. So by making the boundary larger, that's mean we're moving monitoring out to somewhere that's lower on the list. Specifically, we are going to monitor by both the communities with the highest levels of registered pollution for clarity. So now Richard has a comment.
So I want to take it back a second, this is either to reinforce or debunk my recollection of the steering committee's first discussion about expanding these boundaries, let's say at the March meeting maybe. And I thought maybe the CARB folks said this or not, but to touch on Jose's concern about some voices not being heard, my recollection is these boundaries can be adjusted, is that correct? Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Just to touch on, regardless of the outcome tonight, there's still opportunities for adjustments to be made and input. Is that correct? Am I recalling that correctly from our discussion? I guess is what I'm looking at.
Yeah, just think about it as you're the ones that approved this boundary. If for some reason you wanted to modify in the future, there's nothing that would stop you from doing that. I think generally the boundary is just used to constrain where we make investments in. And I will say there are some steering committees that have certain boundaries that are 3 or 5 square miles and some that are 28 square miles. And there's pros and cons to both approaches. But I think when you expand it to a larger area, there's more different sources that you can address, more communities you can make resources available to. So it's totally your prerogative.
So you're saying that if we draw the boundary.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but for the people on the Zoom, we need to be able to hear you, so, can we run the mic over to Ricardo? Oh, sorry, Roberto.
Well, just before Roberto goes, Vince has had a hand up prior.
Okay, and so the question was there enough funding for the new area? And so, as I was just asked that question, I understand there's only enough funding for one phase 2 monitor to be used in the new areas, and we only have one phase 3 monitor for 2025. So to answer your question, is there enough funding for all the monitors? No, I don't think so.
Well, then. Thank you, Vince. Then this question is timely for you also, you mentioned that if we grow the boundary, that means that we might be available to apply for a bigger pot of funding down the road because the area is larger.
No, I think regardless of the size of the boundary or the population, the amount of money that's given out, and it's negotiated between the air districts every year, will be the same. There are some rural communities that are much smaller population, but they also get larger amounts of money. It's just per community, not necessarily population or geographically weighted, if that makes sense.
We're not, so we will have an opportunity for public comment. But right now, we do need to keep the discussion limited to steering committee members. So hold that thought, we'll get back to you when it's the appropriate time of the meeting. Barry?
Thank you. And any other questions, comments, or concerns in regards to action item 1 from the steering committee? Rhonda has her hand up.
So I think we're looking at the territory, the boundaries increasing, and we're wondering, okay, is there gonna be enough money to cover all the boundaries? We're not gonna cover the whole boundary with this increase. I see us trying to focus on, prioritize the ones that have the highest level of pollution. Okay, so that we can take care of the marginalized areas that weren't identified before. So I think you're looking at it from like the big territory expanding, and we're not gonna have enough money for all that. We've already monitored a lot of the territory. We're looking at the ones that are outside that we're increasing. That's how I see it.
Thank you, Rhonda. Now, I'm asking online steering committee members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Hear none, see none. In the room? Hear none, see none. So at this point, steering committee.
We're gonna give them the opportunity.
Well, so
You just tell them.
we do have an item for public comment, so we will not forget about you. Go ahead. Not for this item though, we're gonna move to vote, because discussion's closed, but we will have an opportunity for all members of the public, towards the end of public comment.
At this time, we are seeing.
So, we do need to clarify what the vote is. It's been a robust discussion.
At this time, we will ask for a motion.
We made it.
We've already made a motion.
Seconded.
Or, excuse me, sorry.
So you make the red line go down?
My apologies.
Yeah.
We will now ask the steering committee to vote on the motion. What the motion was, expanding the current boundaries to the established boundaries from June 4th, that we all agreed upon, certain, the steering committee.
Yeah, we have to answer the first question first, which is the camp boundary going to be the same as the CERT boundary? So that's the first action.
I thought we'd already.
We have to vote.
That's the question here.
We'll get there together. We're all in this together. So we're all in this together. So right now, so you might recall, the first action item is to, for the boundaries to be the same. So it's for the camp and the CERT boundaries to be the same. So if the steering committee votes, to make the boundaries the same, then they will be, this red dotted line will be the area for both the camp and the SERB. No? We'll get there together, I'll be there too, so, Janice, go ahead, we wanna hear from the actual experts so that we get it right.
All right, so the first question, do we want the camp and the SERB boundaries to be the same? Our second item, action item that you saw, is then going to confirm the actual boundaries. So it's two different, yeah, so two different motions.
So the vote here is, do we want the camp and SERB boundaries to be the same?
Yes.
So with that, we will roll call for the vote. I should ask, is everybody clear here in the room and online on what the motion is? What we're voting on, excuse me. There are no comments, so there we go, the green drawing.
Okay, but as Janice just reminded me, Vincent also made a recommendation for the boundaries to be the same.
That was in step number. Yeah. That was in.
Okay. All right, so right now, it just got a little muddy, so, let's make sure we're clear. So what they're voting on right now is to make the boundaries the same. Okay, so that's what the steering committee, for online participants as well, steering committee members. So right now, you're voting to make the boundaries for camp and SERB the same. Okay, with that, go ahead
And with that, we'll take roll. I'll take roll on my pen, and I'll start with Roberto. Yeah. I know. If you'd be verbal, please, in addition to the visual. Aye. Thank you. Lori. Rena. Louder, please.
Aye.
Thank you. Vincent.
Aye.
Rhonda.
Aye.
Richard. Aye. Morgan.
Aye.
We're going online. I can't see. Bishop Chris.
Yes.
And Michael.
Aye.
And Sabrina.
I'm very, you can vote for.
And let's make sure we only have two online.
Yes.
And my vote, Barry Boyd, is an aye. So now that we're clear, we just voted to have the camp and SERB boundaries be the same.
Yes.
So now the second question for the vote is, do we want to expand the boundaries as shown on the easel to which we've been discussing? The dotted red line.
Also on page 10.
On page 10 of your information packet. Do that. We'll start again in the room. Roberto.
Right now, we have to go through the whole
Gotta
thing.
go through the whole thing.
Discussion.
Oh, kidding.
Well, but fortunately, there was already a presentation on this, so, you have the information, but we would like to open it up, steering committee members, in person or virtual. Are there any discussion items that you'd like to raise before we move on? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, Barry, you can go ahead, or somebody, can call a motion to vote.
Have a motion to move it.
Okay, great, we have a motion to, move it from Morgan.
Yes.
Okay. And now,
I'll second the motion. And to that now, we'll open public comment.
now we'll open public comment on this action item to, expand so that the boundary is this red dotted line.
Can I just hold it, please? I know I'm wrong.
You are right. Thank you.
So I think it's a little bit disingenuous again to act like $1,200,000 is enough for monitoring. That includes staff and these meetings and your stipends. So going back to my earlier point about these excluded communities not being given a voice in decisions that affect their lives. I feel like I'm being disregarded when I keep asking for a motion, and I believe Stephanie asked for it at one of the subcommittee meetings, that it be a discussion that you guys request a separate steering committee for the camp so that they can drill down and focus. And we've heard here about concerns around money. I think your best bet for getting more money is to say, look, this camp is not a success. These communities were neglected and they really deserve the full focus of the government to correct that injustice. Again, I don't know if you guys, I don't have time to go to meetings every single day for CERTs and camps. And that's what you're gonna be asked to do, because if you're being asked to do a CERT, where are you gonna find the time to also focus on these communities and learn about their issues and hear from them to know where the monitoring should be? It's not our place to decide for them their lives. And I don't see any disadvantage to the steering committee asking for both two separate steering committees, one for a camp and one for a CERT. Right now, they're asking you to vote how they want and hope for the best. Use your voice. It's supposed to be community led. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Do we have any other members of the public like to speak? Thank you. This is a full participatory process. We do have Herman online. Herman, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, so I understand that now we're voting for the expansion of the boundaries, which will both be camp and the SERP. So I think it makes a lot of sense to explore how we can manage that best, especially with areas that need a lot of focus and we need to drill down, like Jose said. So what are the things that we can do to really drill down on those areas? A separate steering committee, I don't know what the legislation says about that, because it's all still under the same award of AB 617, but I am interested in seeing that there is a focus on the expanded areas, because these areas have been neglected for too long. So there's definitely more work to do in those areas that have not had any attention in years. So I am definitely in favor of having the steering committee members consider creating that kind of steering committee that will focus on the brand new areas, just because from what I'm seeing here, I don't know if any of you have any following in those neighborhoods, but you know, when we meet with neighborhood associations or church leaders, which are present in our coalition, they tell us they don't know anything what's going on in those areas. So I also encourage all of you, including members of the audience, to bring people from those neighborhoods to these meetings, because we really don't know what they are thinking. We don't even know what reactions they'll have. So it's very important that we have a thorough approach in figuring out this new expanded areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for public comment before we move forward. Okay, thank you very much, members of the public, for your comments. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it back over to Barry.
Thank you. And as of now, public comment is closed. Let me direct my question that will help answer some of the public comment. We are now in steering committee discussion. And Kevin, if you could clarify in regards to what AB 6, the legislation states in regards in having a vote at the same time, a CERT steering committee and a secondary camp steering committee to be filled with new participants. If you could address that. By new participants, applicants, I don't say participants, but new applicants outside of the current steering committee. So i.e. starting a new camp steering committee by legislation. Does legislation allow that to add a second steering committee for a camp and or a CERT? I'll ask both, even though we're only asking for camp.
Very, so.
Right, so, no, steering committee.
So there's nothing that precludes the air district from making a formal nomination for a new candidate. I think, just like right now, so on Thursday, we're going through the process of the air district with the steering committee, because there was a vote to request to move forward with this serve. That will be, go in front of our board. If our board approves it, moves forward, then you all move into serve implementation with the steering committee. If there was a request for a new camp, then there would be a need to request that through the board. There would be additional funding, additional commitments in the air district, so it would be starting over a new process. It's not the kind of thing that can just be kind of done on a dime, if that makes sense. It goes through the same sort of process that we've gone through in the past to establish the camp and the serve.
I appreciate that, and with the history already established for what it took to become a camp for this particular steering committee, so it is not a new process. The only process, only new piece would be those applying to be in a new camp if said camp was allowed to happen. So there isn't the round robin again of meetings, community meetings, opening up for, hey, this is what we're trying to do. But I'm answering my own question actually as I'm saying that, because we would promote, this is what we're looking for, is a members to create a secondary camp. So to Kevin's point, it's a 50-50, so I'm sorry, I'm answering as I'm asking. So it would still be at least a year process before a second camp came on board. But there would be a camp, and to Kevin's point, we'll say a year or up to a year. But to Kevin's point, that then separate funding would be allocated to that second camp steering committee, separate from the current steering committee.
Could I just make one point to be clear? There are many steering committees across this state that are simultaneously implementing a serve and a camp at the same time. If you wanted to add a second new camp on top of that, that's what I'm talking about. But many steering committees continue to operate the camp and have a subcommittee and report back to the steering committee and report those results annually. So that there's many models for that. What I'm talking about specifically, if there was a request for a second new camp.
I appreciate that, and that was the avenue that I was going down. I'm quite aware that we could do both in this current steering committee, but the question being asked from the public is a entirely new camp. So that's why I'm walking it out to those who may have not understood my point. Thank you, Kevin. With that. Sorry, with a question? I did not see that one. Roberto has a question. Recognize Roberto.
Hold on. Oh, for Roberta, okay.
Thank you, Barry. And I think you're being very optimistic with, you know, adding a second camp, you know, state budget and procedures, you know, to move forward. I work, you know, for state government, I've worked for state government for a while, and, you know, sometimes it's difficult, you know, to move things forward. The question I have is in regards to, you know, if we vote for this expansion, and I think this would be more for the Sacramento Quality Management District. As you know, as Brenda mentioned, this expansion, it's almost gonna double the size of, you know, our area. So how many more committee members are we thinking about adding? Right, I think that's a big question to have, and then, will there be additional staff from the Quality Management District participating in discussions? Because, you know, as Jose, I believe his name, or, you know, public, it is a very valid point, right? I think it is very valid to think about making sure that we are able to represent those voices, right? Like from those community, those areas that have not been represented before. And I think within this community or this group right now, we are from different areas in South Sacramento or Flooring, and, you know, we understand our communities, but I don't know if anybody lives there. And I think, how fast can we onboard new people so that we can continue good work? That's my question.
So, when the steering committee updated its charter, there was, a discussion during that update of the charter about already expanding, the boundaries. And so as they were having that discussion, there was consideration when they chose the number to increase it to 21. So there are, spaces currently to include community members in those areas as part of our steering committee. As you guys, have seen in the previous slide about funding, the funding is allocated to, you know, to the district, right? And it's not necessarily by how many communities we have. And so as we, so I hear the member, Jose's comment in terms of including, and some of the path forward that I've seen with other steering committees across the state is that they do have a subcommittee that they could direct to have, just like we have an outreach committee as a serve community, to determine what the monitoring could look like in the future. We do want to ensure, though, that the monitoring that we are moving into the future also ties into tracking progress for the SERP as well. So you want to have that, you know, tied together. So.
Thank you for that, Janice. And with that, are there any questions from members, steering committee members online? Any other questions from steering committee members here in person? Hear none, see none. So what we'll do now is vote upon the motion of expanding the voted on camp and serve boundaries of the proposed dotted red line boundary. And to that, I'll start with Roberto.
Now it's motion to expand
To expand the boundaries, correct? Lori? Randy?
Yes.
Vincent? Yes. Rhonda?
Yes.
Richard? Yes. Morgan? Michael?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
And Barry Boyd, yes. Motion passes. Forgot to say in the last one as well. So to that, we have now combined, agreed upon that camp and serve will have the same border, and that same border will be the proposed larger grid dotted boundary. So for action item 1 and 2. And so now we will move on to action item number 3.
Before we do that, can you just give yourselves a round of applause if you just made tremendous progress? So,
Now we'll move on to action item 3, which is the United Latinos request to borrow AB 617 air quality monitors. Now, is that plural monitors or monitor?
Two.
And I'll speak to that. I will not be voting on this proposal, but the United Latinos has asked to use phase 2 monitors to be used in an EPA project that we're doing in monitoring for diesel emissions near schools. And so we'll be putting one of them at Grant High School and the other one at the Saba School over on Blue Ridge and Power Inn, where our bus tour went by on last month. We're asking for that, and all the expenses will be covered through the United Latinos grant, the maintenance, the monitoring, and the good thing about it is one of those monitors will be able to use the data collected there and to help us as part of the phase 2 monitoring in our own community, because Sturgeon Power In is now in our new CERT boundaries. And so that is one of the highlighted areas that, we actually drove by there, and it's right next to Procter and Gamble. And there's a lot of, industry and truck traffic right there that, we're gonna be monitoring. Do we have the chart? Chart. Yeah, that one. So that was a presentation, steering committee discussion. Anybody have any discussion? Microphones?
How long do they want to use?
One month.
So I can answer that. In your packets, and you received this on Friday, there is the specific request and when, and that will be from October of 2024 to May of 2025.
Thank you, Jan. And is that all that stuff up there? Oh, it's right up there too. Okay, great.
So if you give that date one more time.
It's right there.
And the lab.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions from the committee? Okay,
Yes, but yes. The two monitors that will be used. One's, phase 2 monitor, one phase 3, well, we only have one phase 3.
we're only asking to use 2 phase 2 monitors.
Two phase 2, I thought, or different earlier. That, never mind, that was a question. On, we're good.
Okay, so is there any other discussion from the steering committee members online? Do I make a motion?
No.
Okay, I don't make the motion.
You're not gonna.
So now there needs to be a motion made to vote on this.
Make a motion that we vote on this.
Rhonda has made a motion to vote.
What are we voting on?
To let them use the monitors.
So Rhonda has made a motion to allow them to use the monitors. And now we need somebody to second it.
Morgan seconded.
And Morgan has seconded.
Now we go to public comment.
So now we're turning over to public comment.
Anyone in the room or online, public with a question in regards to United Latinos borrowing 2 phase 2 monitors?
All right, Herman, go ahead.
Would the data be available to the public after they do the analysis?
Herman, for to answer questions.
Hi, my name is Roman. It's not confirmed, but I will speak with that to Richard. We do plan on having the student projects that they do with the data available to the school, so I would assume so, but that's not a confirmation.
Yes, it would be available.
Okay.
I have one more quick question. This doesn't take away from all this camp and serve resources that we've been talking about, right?
There are 6 of these monitors that we use in phase 2. So this would utilize 2 out of the 6. So there would be 4 available. But as discussed earlier, there are limited resources in terms of running, lots of additional sites. So it would not hinder from, the additional monitoring that we would be able to support.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we look like Bishop Chris.
Yeah, if there's 6 of the monitors and we're using 4, you said, Janet?
Currently, phase 2 has completed already. And so we are no longer using these monitors until we decide in the future.
So we're no longer using none of them?
Correct.
So if they were to use what they're requesting, it wouldn't hinder what we're doing in this discussion.
Correct. It would likely help it because they would be collecting, using these monitors in additional areas that United Latino through their grant is going to be collecting.
And it's at their expense. If I heard, did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, all right, last call for public comment on the action item. Okay, Jose?
You might be selling yourself short, Vince. In Richmond, the steering committee adopted grant projects as part of their monitoring plan and offered them additional support. So if you're gonna be reporting here, you should ask them to give you more support than just the monitors.
Thank you for your public comment. Final call. Okay, seeing none, hearing none, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Barry.
Thank you, and with that, we'll close the public comment. And now turn it over to the steering committee for any further discussion, both here in the room and online. Can we have Raina?
Okay. So phase 2 is closed for the area, but with the expanded boundaries, does that then go back to phase 2 for those areas?
So I'd like to move us away from the terminology of phase 2. So as a background for instance, you folks, we went through 3 phases to determine where we want to put the phase 3 portable laboratory. Right, we wanted data to inform that. And so, sorry, repeat that last part.
So it's talking, I'm asking about like using the monitors, because I don't know what's in phase 2, but since they were already used and not being used in the previous black area, are they, with the expansion of the boundaries, are they now gonna be used in that area to collect data?
So what we can say is that we can continue to monitor with the portable laboratory until 2025. And there needs to be further discussion based on resources, concerns on what the additional monitoring would be. So we can use the samplers that we used in phase 2 to do additional monitoring, but we have to talk about how many sites. And at this point, I believe that we could do probably 1, but it depends on what it would be, right? Like, because it takes resources on, are we talking about laboratory? Are we talking about like, how many times are we sending out staff? So all of that has to be used in part of consideration in that determination, which is why I'm having a little bit harder, trouble saying, yes, we can, do, 1 more site, because I don't necessarily know what sensors or analyzers we're using, what type of fluids are needed.
Okay.
Any other? Ron, ask a question and then we'll go to next.
Quick question for Alex. So we have 6 monitors on phase 2 that aren't being used right now, but we keep using it. We're done with that phase. And we can't use 6 in the future.
So running the sites take mainly staff time, right? So in order for us to, include additional sites, you'd have to, send staff out. And so depending on what we have for resources, we have to limit the number of sites that we have. So yes, we physically, right, have the 6 monitors, but we have to look at it holistically in terms of whether or not the district staff can support the staff, the time to be able to operate those 6 sites.
And would that money come from the 1.2.5?
Yes. Yes. And as a reminder, The state doesn't provide enough funding for that, so that is why that, the response is what it is.
I think my question was answered, but just to remind everybody, so the one monitor that we'll be using at Fruit Region Power In will be available for, the data us to use, and so we're actually getting one out of there. The other monitor will be at Grant High School, which is clearly out of our boundaries, but it will be informative for us to use that information as well.
Thank you for that, Benson. So last, ask any more questions from the steering committee? Online or? Just kidding. Raina has a question.
So Vince, for clarification that, so the one, at Saba would kind of be like a free bonus, like, right? So like there wouldn't be like people that we'd have to allocate our money to, like, we'd be getting that information without having to like, do it ourselves, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Just reemphasizing, United Latinos is paying all costs for the use of the two phase 2 monitors. And as was pointed out by Jose, public comment, there is opportunity to request funding from the state ID card to have those monies covered. Something of that nature, i.e. maybe they won't have to come out of pocket, but the bottom line is the South Sacramento Florence Steering Committee funded monies will not be paying for the United Latino 2 monitors that we're borrowing. So any last question? I'll start with more than
Okay, and then also, while we take this, just a reminder, we have 17 minutes left in tonight's meeting. Time does fly when you're having fun, but we do want to try to end this at 8 o'clock.
So I guess this question is more so for the air district. So just for clarity purposes, and again, this is just also like in ways, me thinking as a community member, how I can find ways to support. What we're specifically talking about is like a funding deficit. So United Latinos has funding. You're able to let them borrow the monitors. Is part of their funding gonna pay for staff to manage this? It's gonna pay for air district staff.
No, so United Latinos is going to run the monitors. They received a grant from US EPA to run these monitors.
Okay. So then that takes me to the second question, kind of similar to one of the things that Raina and I think Rhonda were mentioning. So that's 2 that, like you said, freebies on information and data, and then that leaves 4. And so come 2025 or proceeding into 2025, this is when we'll be having conversations to determine how to allocate where we can put all 4, or we're still or is the funding limited to just being able to do 1 of the 4? Guess that was where I got confused when you said 1.
Yeah, so funding is allocated annually, right? And so we need to have a holistic discussion about what monitoring is needed. What's currently written in the camp is that the portable laboratory can be moved. But we would need to, we can look for other avenues, I would say. Like, for example, another nonprofit decided to apply for a US EPA grant to operate those monitors, then you can do that. But currently, we only have one site that we could operate this month, additional to the portable laboratory, moving that if you'd like.
Okay, and last question. So with the one portable monitor that you said that you had, so now knowing that we've now voted to move the boundaries, does that mean that throughout the process, we continuously are moving the portable laboratory, so we're collecting data all around? Or is it, we're focusing on one specific area for a certain time period, so to speak?
I think that's up to the steering committee.
Okay.
So for example, if you all said, hey, we monitor here 1 year, we want to go to the, a different location, again, depending on continued funding, we can do that.
Okay, great. Thank you for those questions. I'm gonna turn it back to you, Mary.
Thank you for that, and with that, seeing no hands, hearing no one online, and no name tags turned up here in the room, steering committee, we will move on to vote. Motion is to allow United Latinos to use two phase two monitors October 2024 through May 2025 at zero cost to this CSC. Everybody clear? Okay, I'll start the room on the vote. To my left, page first. With Roberto. Louder, please. Thank you, Roberto. Lori.
Yes.
Sabrina.
Yes.
Benson. Abstain. Okay. Rhonda.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes.
Morgan.
Yes.
Michael
Yes.
and Chris.
Yes.
And Barry is a yes. Motion passes. United Latinos. Good luck with your money. I'll pass the mic back over to Jensen to round this.
Well, it's me. Yeah, it's, okay, with the time that we have remaining, we might have to, let's just get through this. So I'm gonna turn it over to Rhonda. You're gonna, provide outreach subcommittee updates. And if possible, limited to just a few minutes.
Okay, we met last week and, we sent, a draft flyer and, provided comments to the Air District. And we have a report back on the senior arts and craft event. I wasn't part of that, I don't know who attended that, but we talked about that. We provided comments on the presentation so that it will be recycled for future outreach. So we got some very good, recommendations for your PowerPoint presentation that you use. That, I think there's some strong points that need to be added, so, we noted that, so hopefully we'll be seeing those changes and the draft goes in. Okay, we want to make it, layman friendly, layman language that doesn't come too much of a, like shop with, talking to the stuff. So I hope that we got our suggestions for that. We discussed community feedback from the senior event. I wasn't part of that. Does anybody know what that was?
Yes, they don't.
Yeah, their district went out to La Familia, to, present on, this information here that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Then we're looking to update the Sac Clean Air website with community specific pictures. So if you have, or want to take pictures out in our community that represent South Sac, okay, and the general area in our boundaries, please send them my way, so I can put them on our website. The interactive map, I'm gonna squash that for now, because I'm still working with another, department for that. Let's see. I already announced the, National Night Out, so I won't repeat that. We already discussed the idea of having a camp serve a dual steering committee or camp subcommittee. That was what we were asking you about earlier. And then, we also wanted to request additional funding from CAR at this meeting for additional monitoring for the new areas that we want to focus. Is that, that's what I have.
Great, thank you, Rhonda. Now I'll turn it over to Janice for district updates.
All right, folks, I'm gonna go.
I have a question. For those pictures, what format do they have to be in for you to get them on the website?
The PNG.
Veronica, maybe you can, send us that information and we'll let everybody know. All right, so we have 3 items. First, really quickly, the CAR board meeting, as Kevin had shared, for, the South Sacramento Foreign Steering, Community to, be selected to develop a CERC. That is going to be this Thursday at the Cal EPA building. The item starts at 4 o'clock. I would encourage, you guys who, you know, if you have some time to provide your support for this particular epic cardboard. So that's some information there. You can attend in person or you can attend in remotely. So we'll provide all that information for you guys via email. All right, next one, I'm actually going to turn it over to our Director of Engineering and Compliance to talk about a permitting action that you might be all interested in.
All right, can you hear me? Okay, great. Amy Roberts, I'm the Director for the Engineering Compliance Division, and I wanted to give an update on a permitting action that we're going through. Currently, our staff received applications from the Sac Sewer District. This is our region's wastewater treatment facility, and they're located within now the approved expanded boundary area. It's also a facility that I know in the past and recently with the bus tour, there were questions about the facility, about the flares that operate there. So we know that it's a facility that you guys know about, wonder about, and care about. And especially now that it's in the boundaries, we thought it would be appropriate to make sure that you saw this permitting action that's going forward. To give you a little bit of background, why it's important. Also, not only that you care about it as a facility in the boundaries, but it's also one of our larger facilities. And there's something really important about this particular project that is happening because one of the pieces of equipment that they're bringing in and looking to get permitted is a fuel cell. And this is unique to the region. It doesn't happen very often, but it's a step in the transition to clean energy because it's a non-combustion way of making electricity and heat for a facility. And so we wanted to highlight this in particular because it is a way that we're transitioning to a cleaner energy future. So more background, right now the facility gets its electricity and heat for the biodigestion of waste treatment. They get that from SMUD. So there's a power plant located next door. The power and the heat can come from SMUD. That's the current way they do business. In the future, though, what they are looking to do is to make their own power and heat on site. They're going to do that by permitting engines, a fuel cell that I just talked about. And then there's also an ancillary piece of equipment that they're also looking to get permitted. What's also important for you to know, just from a transparency sake, is that our evaluation has been ongoing. It's probably gonna end this week. And then once it does, it goes to a public comment period. So it's a 30-day period for you to look at that evaluation, for you to make comments. And so that will probably start at the end of this week is what we're expecting. So again, we just wanted to highlight this project. It's a project of, a facility of concern for you. You want to know about what's going on there. And also for us to let you know about that good news story about the fuel cell and the non-combustion equipment that is coming to that facility. Happy to answer any questions.
Amy, would you restate where the location is?
So if you were to look on the map up there, within your red boundaries, it's going to be located in that southwest corner. If you're going on Casunas River Boulevard and you were going to Highway 5, and it would be the facility to your left if you were driving west on Casunas River Boulevard. There's a large empty, space around the facility. So there's no neighborhoods directly. If you were to look on that slide right there, there's a lot of open space around the facility. But that's a general location there.
This area right here.
And for the sake of time, we are unable to take additional questions from steering committee members or members of the public at this time. However, if you do have questions, go ahead and contact Janet and then she'll send the responses out. But we do want to respect everybody's time tonight. So thank you.
Well, with that, just a quick moment. If anybody does have a question, as stated, before those questions, but because of the importance of this and what a lot of folks may not know what an anaerobic digester is.
I'm gonna go ahead and ask you to speak in the mic then if you're gonna. talk, but, please just, if you could, do you think you could do it in 30 seconds or less?
Don't finish.
Perfect.
Just for the importance of this, anyone that has questions, as Janice said, can email her, public steering committee members in regards to this, but since this is, such an impactful permitting, I say we move this to next month's meeting to let Amy, recap, and then any questions that may want to ask a question, if they still linger at that time, because I do have, several questions that I would like to ask in public, in addition to any emails. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and so, just a reminder, public comment will, open up soon, and I'm sure the Air Bishop will provide information about that as well, how to submit your public comment or questions. Janice, I'm gonna move it over to you for the last item.
So we have 3 minutes. Vincent, would you, sorry, are we moving forward with going with the presentation or are we not? We're for the air quality data.
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. So, we know that you all have been asking a lot about, the air quality data that we've collected. Here's just a sneak peek of it. This is from the phase 2 monitoring, which is for black carbon. It measures, continuously, and this is the same monitors United Latinos as we were talking about earlier. And what you'll notice here is on from moving from left to right, it goes from August to November, and from the concentrations are vertically. So what you can notice is that the times when we do notice the most, the highest concentration is during wildfire season. And I'll remind folks, I know that it looks like a, peak up and down, but our federal standard for PM 2.5, which black carbon is a part of, is at 35. So even though you're seeing up and down, you can see that in general, outside of those highlighted gray areas, we're at, reading at about, 4 or 5 micrograms over time. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, go back, just one more slide. Go, yeah. And likely black carbon levels are greater over the colder months in November through February, likely due to residential wood smoke contribution and, and our meteorological conditions during the winter time is exacerbating pollutions from all sources. So it's not just, residential wood smoke. It may be a combination of that. It's just that our weather keeps it at that, increases our level of air pollution. Next slide, please. So keep going, because I know. Okay, there you go. This is monitoring data from our phase 3 portable laboratory. This is for PM 2.5, starting from April to the end of this year. And you can see that the data in general have been moderate for PM 2.5. Outside of wood smoke impacts, levels are more elevated October through December. So during the winter time, as I just talked about in the last slide. Next slide. Keep going. One more. So this is also data coming from the portable laboratory for ozone. So the last one we saw was from PM 2.5. This one is for ozone. Typically in the Sacramento region, you see higher ozone concentrations in the summertime, which is why you see that during June through August, September timeframe is where you see more elevated concentration. There were 6 different days during this time period, June through August, where it was above the federal health standard of 0.07 parts per million. That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Janice, for that information. And again, any questions or comments that you might have, please contact Janice directly and she'll follow up. So with that, we are approaching the end of the meeting. Does any of the steering committee members have any new business? We already covered upcoming meetings. So does anybody have any new business?
Yes, there are a couple of us, we'll go with Morgan, she has her hand up. All right.
I can make mine really quick.
Okay, thank you.
So I just wanted to let everyone know, and you can pass this on to your networks, but Culver Block in conjunction with Stockade Parks and Rec. Stockade Rec and Park. We have harvested about 50 to 60 pounds of zucchini squash, the tomatoes and peppers. So if you know anybody that may need some, we got tons of produce to give away. That was it.
It's wonderful, thank
And
you.
I have some in my car too. if anybody wants.
Okay,
It's like the side of
I
it.
sold your car right now.
Any other steering committees in the room and or online with any new business? No one, I have, new business, and I'd like to make an official ask that, be placed on next month's agenda, that we revisit our charter and change our charter as it relates to the blind vote for new applicants. So going forward, all applicants to the steering committee, the steering committee will have all information. So we will be informed as it is in, city council, TNPE meetings. So everybody has, the public included, will know exactly who the individuals are, and no longer a blind vote. And this is a new concept. Again, it's in both city, county, and state, and government in regards to applicants for commission boards and or committees. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Janice would like to respond.
Yeah, so we already do that practice where we provide the steering committee with actually the entire application. I think we did this last month with the name of the applicant, their responses, and then the steering committee deliberates the applicants and as part of, on who to consider to be a part of the steering committee.
Gotcha, but we did that with Roberto because he was in the room, but on the charter, when we voted a few months back, it was voted in as a blind vote, meaning that the name wasn't given. That's what was written in the charter.
The steering committee voted at, I want to say it was like an earlier month this year to release all information. So the steering committee actually had a vote to say all information was going to be released. Obviously, we're not going to release their home address, right? Like that's not going to be, or, their personal phone number, but their name and their responses are provided to all of the steering committee members as well as the public that we have when they're up for consideration. So that is already happening in practice.
Fantastic, because I remember when we voted the charter, it was the opposite. I was one that I appreciate the blind vote, but I've changed my mind. So I missed that in the charter, but thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so then that particular item of new business is now old business. And so with that, just really quickly before we adjourn, so these are the upcoming meetings for the remainder until the finish point. Today's July 22nd. We did get through the final boundaries vote as well as the air monitoring data. And then now I'm going to turn it over to Janice to quickly go over the other meetings.
Nope, we're gonna go back real quick. So, that was a sneak peek on the monitoring data. We have collected a lot of monitoring data up to this point that we would like to continue to share. So, my question, I think, to the steering committee is that would you like to continue to either, hear more in the August meeting? Or do we go to budgets and funding? As you guys are all aware, we, have a lot of engagement and robust conversation at every meeting. And so we do try to limit the number of items from a request from steering committee members on what goes on in each month. And so my question is, do we want to slide it where we have air monitoring data in August 22nd and then we slide everything down? Or do we want to continue to have budget and funding discussion in August? And we can move the air monitoring data to September and move the CERT down. So to October, and then on October, you move that to November. Any preferences?
With additional air monitoring,
So there's speciated data that we collected through the canisters. We've collected that through, so it actually talks about specific types of different types of, species from PM 2.5.
My
Or
opinion,
gas.
we all have one goal, we'll make our comments, is that we keep the budget and funding and keep the CERC community panel and push the air monitoring down to October.
My comment is, we'll be going over all these at the subcommittee meeting as well, the data. I would hope to, because that's why I've been asking Janice for months about the data from the CERT or from the phase 3 monitors and actually what is in the air. And so we'll be going over that information at the CERT subcommittee meeting. And I would like to invite everybody to attend the CERT subcommittee meeting if you can, so we can discuss some of these things prior to our steering committee meeting, but, hopefully we'll be looking at some of that data as well at the CERT subcommittee meeting.
So we can continue on some of them, but as you know, the meeting's usually at the end of the month and we're preparing that information throughout the month. So because the CERT subcommittee meeting is in, I think, the first week, next week, we would not be ready to be able to provide that information at this next August meeting.
Okay, does any of the virtual steering committee members have any questions or any, response to Janice's question?
September.
Okay.
So my understanding, I'm just gonna repeat this, is that we are going to go to budget and funding. In August, we're gonna keep CERC community panel in September. We're also going to be presenting some information for air monitoring data at the CERC subcommittee in September. And we will have the we'll have the air monitoring data in the October meeting, and then sliding that community emission inventory sources of emission into November. That is my understanding.
That sounds correct, but to Vincent's ask, since you will have the information available for the CERC meeting in September, and again, as Vince asked everybody to attend, if you can, great, if not, you can't, but at least the CERC subcommittee will have that information as early as, first Monday, or first Tuesday, excuse me, of September, and then bring it to the general body, steering committee in October.
November.
Or November. But it will be available and presented in the subcommittee, CERC subcommittee in September.
September 3rd.
September 13th.
Okay, all right. So then lastly, before we adjourn, we're almost there. This is where we invite any remaining, public comment. Go ahead.
There have been a few things put in the chat as you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sarah noted that there are a couple of items in the chat. I'm gonna go ahead and, turn it, over to the in-person public comment.
We're going over at 8 o'clock.
Oh, I know. So this is Adrian Wren with Valley Vision. Just want to congratulate you guys on the decision made today. We were a big supporter of expanding boundaries. Have been noodling on this next step thought about the camp and the CERT. And I think there's something to be said for, and I'm glad there's this September 23rd thing coming up, which looks like it's going to be you guys learning about how CERT's been implemented in other areas. Because I think that'll be really informative for you guys in terms of how you structure a committee or a subcommittee process. I think another thing you guys could do is maybe have a retreat at some point. Now that you've made a bunch of big decisions, you've gotten a bunch of new committee members, it might be time to, schedule a half-day retreat and kind of figure out how you want to implement these new things and structure your committee and any subcommittees. I know there are some subcommittees that, I hear about are happening, but they aren't formal or they aren't easy to find information about. And so if you guys are able to maybe determine a way to formalize those, I think that'd be really great for next steps. So, thank you.
So, you know, Kevin was asked a question about the legislation, and you were told that there's nothing that precludes you. There's also nothing that precludes you from saying, we want to remain a camp and add a CERB. The board can do whatever they want. They're the board. And so if you came and asked, they could ask the air district to do both and then figure out how you're gonna do it. What I heard today pretty much is that you're gonna have one monitor that gets moved around for the next year and a half. And if you've been exposed to really good air quality monitoring, you know that's not enough time to characterize one neighborhood's air quality, much less a lot of them. Thanks.
Thank you. Edmond, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I know this is a long process. Just to give some background, we have a PRA request that I just posted on the chat here. Our EJ communities in South and North Sacramento have a huge number of people who are homeless. The point and count time doesn't matter because what we go by is by public assistance records. So just to give you some numbers, there are 50,112 people that claim homelessness that are on public assistance, Medi-Cal particularly, and 29,962 for people who are on food stamps. These are people who are struggling under extreme weather out there, heat and storms during the rain. And I really would like to encourage the steering committee to start considering other actions that are creative to include those people who are going to be and continue to be victims to extreme weather during the summer and winters here in Sacramento. On another note, a formal request now, our Spanish-speaking community goes to work and they have all kinds of wacky schedules because of their work schedule. So I would encourage that the your Zoom system include an interpreting option. All your interpreter needs to do is have a microphone that can be, I guess it's a webinar function in Zoom. So as your interpreter is translating in the meeting right there, it's also being put here in the Zoom. So anybody that's a Spanish-speaking person can easily get translation. So I'm making this a formal request for the next meeting because that's when we'll be able to expand and include people who are in the new boundaries. And finally, I still think we need to create a very creative approach to the steering committees that are needed for the new boundaries, but that's yet to come. So we're going to keep pushing for that. But please understand that we have some very marginalized and poor communities in South Sacramento, 50,000 plus that are homeless and that are having to breathe all this bad air, but as well as surviving the elements. And we really need your help to consider this as part of your work. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Before I turn it over to Erica, I want to acknowledge the comments that were in the chat. From Eric, there's a comment, CARB set program can fund monitors. And then there's a comment, it's 8:03. That was 12 minutes ago, it's now 8:15. And then lastly, there's a link in the chat to call all of your attention to, for those who are participating, and it looks like it's about supplemental environmental, supplemental environmental projects. So with that, we'll close it out with Erica as the last comment.
Thank you, and I just want to thank the steering committee for allowing us to go over the 8 o'clock time. I also want to put this, on your radar that, the air quality has greater impacts, and I think that we kind of forget the human impact of the everyday lives. And right now there's a homeless family. Both parents have cancer with 2 kids or 3 kids, but not even 18 years old yet. And they're looking at one of their parents dying really soon. I think the more and more I see these truck projects and this being concentrated in the South Sac area, the more I think about how important the monitoring piece is so that we actually can understand the concentration and how this is impacting people who are living in the community in their everyday lives. So I just wanted to share that story. Again, we have families who are homeless, 2 parents with cancer. These kids are facing no other support system. And so thanks again for all the work you guys are doing.
Thank you, Erica. And on that note, it is a reminder, thank you all steering committee members as well as members of the public for coming together tonight to work on this very critical topic. And so with that, we are going to go ahead and adjourn, but before we do that, what time is it? It's time for the South Sacramento South Florida clap. So on that note, what do we want?
Now.
I need a little more energy. What do we want?
South
Clean air. All right, wonderful. Meeting is adjourned at 8:17. Thank you all so much. We will see you next month. Or before. Yeah, give yourselves a round of applause. It was a great meeting. Thank you.